Okay, I think we're ready to get started, and it's my privilege to introduce Noel Poyo, a real friend of CDFI's. Noel is the U.S. Treasury Department's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Community Economic Development, with responsibility for the CDFI Fund, ESIP, and other Treasury initiatives to advance a more inclusive economy. Prior to joining the Biden administration, Noel served as executive director of the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders, NALCAB. During the early months of the pandemic, Noel and I had many late night phone calls as NALCAB, OFN, and our other partners advocated for CDFIs playing a bigger role in the Paycheck Protection Program. But I was first inspired by Noel when he spoke at the last OFN in-person conference in 2019. In his remarks, Noel talked about the importance of equity in the multiple meanings of that word. He underscored the need for balance sheet equity so that the CDFI industry could scale, because when CDFIs are bigger and stronger, we can make faster progress toward achieving equity for disinvested people and communities. CDFI industry could not have a stronger advocate or a better friend in this key Treasury position than Noel Poyo. Thank you for all you do and for joining us today.
Jennifer, thank you very much for the kind introduction. It is, as always, my genuine pleasure to join the CDFI Coalition, the members of the CDFI Coalition. This is in a day, a week, and a month, and a year that have had a lot of pressures on time. This is like getting a little time at home, and so I really appreciate being able to speak with you. The reference back to, first off, an in-person conference. Boy, I look forward to it with all the ways in which I think we still are a little worried and cautious. I sure do look forward to a time when we'll be back to an in-person conference. But in the meantime, this has been, these virtual gatherings have been really incredibly effective. And CDFI Coalition has, if nothing else, really increased the level of advocacy on behalf of not just CDFIs, but really a broader cause that CDFIs are a critical part of, but not the only part of. And it's that bigger picture, that bigger cause that I want to just take a minute to talk about, and then bring it back to our work at Treasury. It is important for us to step back and remember the place of community economic development in our economic system. That this is work that is about making the free market work for everybody. Free markets are incredibly powerful engines. I am a deep believer in the value of, or the capacity of markets to generate public good, to change the circumstances of people who begin life in difficult circumstances. But to be truly free, to be effective in that task, there have to be, we have to remember our economics 101 to some extent. There have to be low barriers to entry, free flow of information, and almost above all else, access to capital, and the technical expertise, the place to learn how to most effectively use that capital. And that is critical to our economic system, not just in certain corners of our country, in certain communities, but fundamentally to the proper functioning of this big economy. We live in a world of global economic competition that is fundamentally different than where we were after World War II and the decades immediately after World War II. I think about sort of Olympic races. You think back on Jesse Owens, winning Olympic races by yards, long winning distances, and today Olympic races are decided by hundredths of seconds. And that metaphor in my mind, I think about it when I think about sort of the global competition that the U.S. economy faces. And so it matters that we have, to mix my metaphors, all oars in the water. We cannot afford to leave significant economic potential in our nation on the sidelines. And I think that it is unfortunate and not correct when there is the rhetoric of charity or of social services brought to the work of social finance, of community development investment. That's not to suggest that charity or social service is not important. It is. It has an important place in a system, in a moral system. But social finance, community development investment is not charity. It is not a social service. It is about leveling a playing field in a free market. It is about getting that engine that strengthens our country at, operating at full potential. And that requires, again, every oar in the water. The post-pandemic recovery is going to be a measure of our progress in this field. It is sad, it is unfortunate that in our country we've had to get good at coming out of great recessions, but we are getting good at it. We are certainly getting a lot of practice in this past couple of decades, right? And so there were many ways in which, if you look at the economic data that came out of the Great Recession, a dozen plus years ago, that recession continued on and on in its negative impacts for low-income people in particular, but more broadly for people who experience barriers to accessing financial services, accessing capital, accessing that free market engine that exists in our economy, for some more than for others. And we have already, coming out of this pandemic-driven recession that happened, we have already learned, and already we are doing better. The economic recovery has been dramatic. The job creation in this economy is extraordinary. And I think that the fact that we have been able to prevent a public health catastrophe from turning into a longer-term economic catastrophe, there is no denying the short-term economic catastrophe that in some ways was unavoidable when the pandemic hit. But things like in this field, the rapid response program that Treasury and the CDFI fund was able to put out so rapidly after it was made available. And the rental assistance program, which I've had the privilege of leading Treasury's team implementing that program, for all of the challenge of getting it off the ground, has really had an enormous impact for many low-income renters. There is a homeowner assistance fund. There's the state and fiscal local recovery fund that is really changing one of the most important sort of economic challenges that came out of the last recession, which is that we saw a drag on economic growth actually happen in state and local government in many ways, which took years to recover because of the cycle of taxation, and you bring in revenue, but real challenges there that the state and local recovery fund has really been a difference maker. And so if we have come out of that dip more effectively, we have the opportunity to look forward now and say, what does a more equitable economy look like? What does it look to get all oars in the water faster? Because the speed at which we do it matters. It matters to the children who are growing up while their parents are figuring out a small business or getting a job or being able to access stable, affordable housing. All of those things that the community development sector really focuses on in places where in many ways it's needed most. And so the Emergency Capital Investment Program, for example, will have its impact as we come out of the immediate crisis move into a period where there's the opportunity for more equitable growth. The minority lending program that is coming. Similarly, we will have this opportunity to do this, the ongoing investments of the CDFI fund. And this is not a government-driven endeavor by any stretch of the imagination. The opportunity for social finance more broadly is extraordinary in this moment. And so I think we have to think about this field from a perspective of growth and not just growth. And I know I've said this to the CDFI coalition before, but of dealing with dramatic growth in the community development sector and community economic development space. We need to be prepared to think about what it looks like for balance sheets to be 10x and 100x, because there has been this transformational investment that Congress made available through the Emergency Capital Investment Program, through the Rapid Response Program, the Minority Lending Program, $12 billion altogether that is making its way into the bloodstream of this field, and it will be successful not simply if these dollars are used to produce impact, but if it leads the private market in a direction. Because to see dramatic growth, we know that it will require measuring impact in a different way, will require measuring risk in a different way. So we can confidently not just put a few dollars into place, but really be able to invest in tremendously robust ways in order to produce the small business growth opportunities, the stable housing that is so desperately needed in this country right now, especially for low and indeed even middle income people in this country. To see the kind of job creation that is far flung, that is accessible to people all over, whether they're in rural communities, dense urban communities, and everywhere in between. And you know, this is fundamentally an endeavor that I hope we can all do together as a nation. I do understand the sort of cynicism from all sides of the political spectrum of sort of where we are and how so many things end up in a partisan battle and all those sorts of things. But the champions of community development finance have come from both sides of the aisle. The underlying philosophy of this work connects deeply to the underlying philosophy of people who are driven primarily in their thinking by free markets, as well as people who are driven primarily in their thinking by ensuring equity and access for all. These things come together in the implementation that you all do in the community development field. And I surely this is a place where, as we move forward in this country, we can see the opportunity to link the priorities of different people of different stripes, different political views, in a joint endeavor that recognizes this nation, this economy, is having to compete on a world stage in a way that just does not allow us to leave the potential of our people on the table. And as I've said before, you know, when I say our people, I think we have to own one another in that vision, own each other's talents, own each other's challenges and barriers as well. And so as we measure impact in this field, I think we are going to have to become, you know, I think one of the critical endeavors for this field is going to be able to, is getting to a place where we can measure what is deep impact and what is broad impact, what is going to drive our economy towards greater equity more rather than less. And these things, I think, we're still struggling with, not just in the government, but across social finance more broadly. And I think that this is a place where we're going to have to spend some time in these coming years really digging into being able to put metrics and measurements both to the risk that we see out there in the marketplace, but also the impacts that we have. And so I'm looking forward to communicating throughout this year with all of you really engaging in this work and expanding this field in dramatic ways in the coming years. And so thank you again very much for the opportunity to be with you.
Thank you, Noel. You're always welcome at your home with the CDFI industry. And we're inspired by your call to action for deep impact and broad impact, and stand ready to work with you and your Treasury colleagues on your important priorities. Thank you for joining us. And I think I am turning it over now to my